So continuing then, a little bit about tonight's presentation. The central topic around enterprise quality has many intersecting themes adopted from the GM and Toyota NUMMI venture, where he was assigned as a plant manager. Some examples are NUMMI the experiment, some applied lessons, the role of leadership in an enterprise quality organization, a review of philosophy and strategies for execution, the application of total management systems across cultures, practical models for strategy application. And in tonight's presentation, Ricardo will outline topic components and key themes, factors, and phases of the turnaround in a period of just 28 months. The joint UAW GM leadership team adapted many attributes honed from his time at NUMMI and his previous assignments. Quality was extended to every dimension of our enterprise, from the receiving dock to the customer, as our numerator, with people as the denominator. So with that, Ricardo, I would like to turn it over to you if you'd care to share your screen. You should see the option to share. I think it might be at the bottom of your screen. Do you see that?
I sure did. Let's see, share, here we go.
There we go, something's happening.
Great.
Okay.
Here we go.
There we go.
Can you see that?
Yes, we do.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to move this box slightly over so I can see the entire slide. So I'll initiate. So number one, good evening to all of you, and thank you very much for your invitation to participate today. Thank you to the ASQ Phoenix section members, and specifically to Mr. Gibson, Mr. Nanda, and Mr. Mitchell for your support in getting me here. So hopefully you will find this fruitful. Okay, so for whatever reason, I'm not able. Okay, great. Okay. So today what we're going to do is discuss enterprise quality performance at turnaround at GM Dayton. And when I pulled up information about ASQ here in Phoenix, you used the term excellence through quality. And it's fascinating. The definition of happiness from the ancient Greeks is the pursuit of your ability along lines of excellence. And I think that encompasses an awful lot about quality and its discipline. As Mr. Nanda mentioned, this is a very succinct definition of management, the technology of human accomplishment. And today, hopefully, I will be able to discuss with you both of these components, the numerator, the denominator, in the context of an enterprise, meaning the customer is a numerator, people of the organization as a denominator, as we accomplish the task of customer satisfaction and the pursuit of excellence. I've always been fascinated with quality since joining General Motors and the automotive sector because of its pervasive nature and the quality of enterprise goal attainment through the quality of human accomplishment. So there are technical components and there are also human components that have to be blended and merged to accomplish the task. In some organizations, it's readily available to do or easy to do. In other organizations, it's more of a struggle. And today we'll talk a little bit about an area where it was a struggle initially, but we built up momentum that was very positive. As Mr. Mitchell alluded to in the preamble to the presentation, this was the outline of what I presented to Mr. Nanda about what we would speak about this evening and discuss. And feel free to ask any questions and jot them down. I'll answer absolutely anything. But effectively the role of leadership, philosophy, and strategies, the application of what I call the Toyota management system, because personally I believe it goes beyond production. It's a philosophy that encompasses literally everything we do at Toyota. And then practical models for strategy application that begin to engage people and human beings in a very unique way. Now, moving to what we're going to talk about tonight. These are the two facilities in Dayton, Ohio, that struck General Motors in July of 1996. Wisconsin Boulevard on the left and Needmore Road on the right. Can everybody see the presentation well?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, super.
Looks good.
If anything goes
Yes.
wrong, please just let me know. Feel free. Okay. Now, the fascinating thing is Wisconsin Boulevard was the original workshop for the Wright brothers. And it was on the National Register of Historic Places. General Motors took it over in the 1930s and 1940s as primarily a brake component manufacturing facility. Needmore Road was built in the 60s. It was a far more modern facility. There were two entities, two complexes, 10 miles apart, with 7 distinct manufacturing plants. And again, spanned the realm of time from the 30s to the 60s to the 90s and the 2000s. It was represented by UAW Local 696 of the International Union in Detroit. Now, the excerpts today are components of the presentation, needless to say, are going to be items that were shared primarily with the CEO of Delphi, GM Delphi, Mr. Battenberg, over the course of the time that we engaged this turnaround, and GM CEO, Mr. Smith, and the GM board. And so these are some of the booklets that we would hand out on those visits. And from them, I secured a conceptual framework for this presentation. This is my background leading to today's topic. As I mentioned before, electromotive division in Chicago, that's where I was born and raised. Moving on to Fisher Body, Livonia, GM at Auburn Hills plant in Michigan, GM Orion Assembly, GM IFG Mexican operations, moving on to NUMMI, and then the assignment that I had at Delphi at Wisconsin Needmore. Now, a little bit of background of July 1996. The UAW authorized Local 696, the International, to strike Wisconsin Needmore, the entire complex. Outsourcing was the main issue of the strike. Wisconsin Needmore was the sole source for GM supply for brake and chassis components, and for about 75% of GM global assembly operations were impacted. We directly shipped 18 assembly plants in North America, 9 powertrain plants, and 5 assembly international plants. The strike crippled the GM capabilities globally, and it had a domino effect in industries such as rubber, industries such as glass, because when you shut down assembly plants, no one can build, and you can't build without brakes. The strike lasted 1 month, and a ceasefire was called by all parties. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm actually using the exact word that was used when I arrived. Ricardo, we have a ceasefire. It connoted a war. And it was something that I found interesting in the language that was used. Contractual negotiations were to be initiated for resolution. And the history of labor discord went back primarily to the 80s and 90s with some wildcat strikes. For whatever reason, I cannot move on. I'm trying to move. I'm stuck here. Can you hear?
Sometimes you have to click in the slide and then you can advance down.
Okay. Okay. So here we go. I'm back on. Thank you. On August 1st was my first day. I was asked to lead the facilities in mid-July, right in the middle of the strike, and moved up from my assignment in Mexico, the north of Mexico and California, up to Dayton. I was directed on 8/1 in meeting our CEO, Jack Smith, and Mr. Battenberg, our CEO at Delphi, that I was directed to tell the UAW that day of GM's intention to fix, sell, or close the facilities. I was introduced to the UAW leadership on the 1st of August. About 30 leaders were at that meeting. I met every single UAW leader, and I walked up to every single person prior to the meeting, introduced myself, and shook their hand. The UAW began an introduction process. I was very brief, and then they oddly asked me to leave the room because they wanted to develop questions privately to ask me. So I returned to the room, and they asked me 3 questions. These were the questions. How long did it take you to get to Dayton from Mexico on a donkey? Ricardo, did you buy a home here with a barn for your donkeys? The third question is something that I would not repeat within the framework of our organization, but it was an incredibly vulgar accusation about my sister. So when they stated this, having worked in UAW facilities and seen at times the unfortunate dynamics that occur, I took every question and I walked the room. I didn't stay at a podium. I walked the room, and I basically said, ladies and gentlemen, I think we have more important things to talk about, like the fact that we've just shut down all of our customers for 1 month, that we have significant challenges in safety and challenges in quality and challenges in delivery. And all of those challenges impede our ability to execute excellence in terms of customer satisfaction. And quite honestly, ladies and gentlemen, we have to satisfy our customer to exist. So it was a first opportunity to change the tone and dialogue. Now, I mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, that I experienced this kind of, let's say, dynamic, disrespectful dynamic in UAW plants in my prior history. My assignment at Auburn Hills, where I mentioned in red in the slide with Gordy, he was the shop chair, the union head at that plant. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm not kidding you. When he would speak to you in a room, he would hold a cup like this occasionally up to his mouth while he was looking at you, and he would spit chewing tobacco into the cup. So to some degree, I was brought up in that environment, and I saw it. As a plant manager, as a manager, as a leader, you can't diminish yourself into that kind of culture. You have to take it, turn it around, and as we say at Toyota, red is good. It's an opportunity to make it green, and that's what we began to do. Now, this was a letter that I received, and I highlighted an area from Dave Alexander. The UAW actually had chaplains that were assigned. And you can read this letter about his hope for improvement between the management and the union. Now, this was approximately 2 months after that initial meeting. And we'll talk about how we had general communication meetings. And he states very specifically that he was delighted by the fact that cuss words were not thrown out to fit in with the good old boys. And then he talks about the past. And he also talks about the context of the presentation. The opportunity that the union presented to me that day when they were very insulting, I found out a few months later, there were a small minority of people who generated those insults. The vast majority of the people in that room with the UAW leaders were embarrassed by what was done. And we catalyzed that to move on. So what I'd like to do right now is speak about those 4 green elements that were in my proposal to ASQ, basically surrounding the process of the change at our facility through philosophy, through the role of leadership, the application of the Toyota management system and some of its elements, and practical models for strategy execution. That's the press that we're in, like a 4-corner offense. And the context of the change was this wheel, this cycle, in which initially one has to analyze the organization and the basis for change. You do that both initially and continually. One has to separate from the past with dignity and build a positive future. Oftentimes, when people assume roles in leadership, there's a tendency to potentially speak negatively about the antecedents from a management perspective. One cannot engage in that. Once you engage those first 2 components, you can then begin to exercise the cycle, which is establishing a common vision, the use of symbols and signals, creating a sense of urgency, creating enabling structures such as training, focusing on leadership, its sponsors and its champions, crafting a plan to implement, which is very TMS, very disciplined. What I spoke to Mr. Nanda about earlier with respect to Miyadera-san's comments about discipline. Communicating, engaging people, being respectful and honest, then developing quick wins and promoting innovation, system alignment with policies and procedures, then eventually moving on to measures, milestones, creating a system of cadence, almost religiously, a cadence to review, measure, and engage PDCA. And then needless to say, at the end, is this process, some form of rewards or recognition that formalizes the change and reinforces it. So I'm going to go through these elements in the presentation as we executed them. And in the appendix, you will see the definition of each of these elements that I have in a general way for applications I would perceive when one wants to institute change anywhere. So when we talk about analyzing the organization basis for the turnaround, that's that inner part of the circle. Needless to say, you have to understand organizational operations, assess key functional areas, the environment, its history, quickly assess strengths and weaknesses, and the effects of proposed changes on the ability to craft an effective plan for improvement. You do this both initially and continually. Quickly assess critical needs and address them. All new systems and plans, in this case, had to be jointly developed and approved by the UAW and GM. We had to become one. We had to be one. It was essential. Now, the shop chairman who called the strike was a gentleman by the name of Mr. Joe Buckley. God rest his soul. Now, for whatever reason, he was demonized at General Motors, and I can conceivably understand why some people did that. But Joe and I, for whatever reason, ladies and gentlemen, we quickly got along. Literally the first day we met, we just hit it off. Lord knows why, but it happened. And I think part of it was the embarrassment that he had at that initial meeting with some of his reports. I also identified a gentleman by the name of Jim Valella. He was a quality network lead, administrative person who had great respect with the union and with their team members. I noticed that on the Gemba. He became a great sensei to me in this process, along with UAW senseis Milan Stavis and Tony Carrington. Those are the gentlemen. Those were my senseis that helped guide me through the process. And I think it's very important to engage people in an organization who have been there, who have years of experience to help you and to facilitate change. God rest Milan's soul. God rest. Now, when I arrived, I also realized we didn't have a business plan, a safety plan. Values were not pronounced. There were no complementary human development plans. Joe Buckley and I dedicated ourselves in 1 month to do that, to sit down and write them out. We simultaneously initiated the local contract negotiations, which is a challenge because you're running a business at the same time you're engaging in negotiations that can be tedious because you require the international in Detroit to approve what you do. And they can interject themselves at any stage to facilitate it or to derail it. We structured and launched joint monthly meetings with every team member, 3,100 people. Joe and I led the meetings. It took 18 one-hour meetings in a day, and we did them in 1 day because we never wanted information to get old. And cadence that on a monthly basis, a quarterly basis, depending upon need, but primarily initially on a monthly basis, with half an hour for open questions. Ladies and gentlemen, when we did this the first time, our HR director, Mark Cashdollar, said to me, Ricardo, we'll ask people to jot down their questions and I'll filter them to you. Now, I'll never forget, I said, Mark, I appreciate your suggestion, but no. If I'm going to help facilitate leadership here, I'm going to take any question and move forward. We also, in those meetings, reviewed enterprise metrics by objectives. In our case, it was safety, quality, cost, fast, and great. That's what that acronym stands for, and customer focus, because we lost it. Now, at the same time, we had to disengage from the past with dignity and respect and awake to a new reality, slowly but surely, isolating structures and routines that no longer work, yet maintain equilibrium. The primary routine that we walked away from was lack of systems, a lack of vision, a lack of values, and then abject disrespect. We began to move beyond them with the participation and thoughts of team members, as mentioned by Dave Alexander, and we began to build critical mass, momentum. And we did this all upon the foundation of respect. Being from Illinois, as children, we were inculcated with stories of Abraham Lincoln. There's a story of a farmer that Abraham Lincoln told that I told one time in an all-employee meeting. And basically, the moral of the story is all that you give to others, you give to yourself. And that's very, very true. Disengage with dignity and respect and move forward. So now I'm going to go on to each of the dimensions of the turnaround and the change process, starting with the common vision and values. As I mentioned, Joe and I developed a safety and business plan in a pyramid format. They became symbolic, aesthetically pleasing, clear communication, you'll see them momentarily, with key enterprise questions, business questions. Communicated both plans, pyramids, in initial all-employee meetings. The intention was to foster new culture that Mr. Nanda spoke of, the importance of culture. Values defined our beliefs, laminated every single copy, and gave out 3,100 of them to every person. All our actions were stated in those meetings. What we do has to be stratified by safety, quality, cost, fast, and great. If we do those 5 things well, we'll have customer focus. We'll have customer focus. In Alice in Wonderland, there's a wonderful quote. If you don't know where you're going, 1,000 roads will take you there. And quite honestly, companies that don't have a true north, that are not aligned, you may have people going in one direction. You may have a person going here and a person going back there. You need a true north. And so we began to provide the plant with a true north. We initially would start meetings with our focus on safety. You'll see momentarily with data that we had a trajectory at these facilities that was very poor. Prior to 1996, there had been 2 deaths in that facility and serious injuries. And you can see the format for creating a vision and safety, a mission, values, objectives, strategies, and goals that answer these enterprise questions. What are we going to be? What are we going to do? What do we believe in? Where are we going to win? How are we going to win? And how we measure our success. that infamous question that I've often asked leaders, and they can't answer it very succinctly or matter-of-factly. This was our business plan. Again, modeled in the same fashion, answering the same questions. But I would point out two things. The fact that in our vision, we're pursuing excellence and we're pursuing winning and learning. And I'll get to those components momentarily and how they all blend together. And I will say that the values, we also define them. You'll see that momentarily. But again, we stratify our actions in safety, quality, cost, fast, and great, and then be the customer-focused supplier. Execute strategies to that end, and then you can see how we measure our success. Again, ladies and gentlemen, this will all be yours. Here were the values that Joe and I put together and defined. This is half of them. It's a very big, big sheet. And can everybody see me?
Yeah, I can see the
Great.
first four.
The reason I'm asking that is because I have some samples. So here's the value document laminated that we gave out to people. But there they are. We defined each of these, and that's very critical, starting with people and respect and the focus on customers and safety being the envelope. We then concluded the definitions to define very succinctly continuous improvement and winning. And you'll see the construct of the winner's profile and how that came about. Mr. Nanda, that's a fascinating question, how that document was written. And we can talk about that maybe in the question and answer period. That's fascinating. So we want to move on after creating that vision to symbols and signals. The respect and the response to the initial questions at that meeting with the UAW set the tone or atmosphere. Dave Alexander shared that with you. Safety and business plan pyramids became symbolic for action. Leaders were expected to reflect and live the values. And we'll talk a little bit of how we shared leadership momentarily. And every single meeting, we requested that it be initiated with the pyramids and draw a linkage to the theme at hand. Whether it be delivery, whether it be quality, whether it be engineering, whether it be design, we initiate a linkage to the pyramid and to the execution of customer-focused excellence. I moved my office from a tower that was on Wisconsin Boulevard in the engineering to plexiglass offices on the floor in both complexes. Okay. And the reason I did this, number one, I was taught that, and I've always enjoyed that. I don't like offices. I don't care for them very, very much. And the plexiglass was so that people could see me if I was in the office. If I wasn't in the office, I was out on the floor. And that was very critical. We made an administrative change in our leadership. Ms. Hatton became our administrative lead, and she had an attitude of my office is your office. Therefore, people would come repeatedly to the office to engage us in a variety of ways. The response from team members was beginning to blossom, and we were bringing life to the organization, just as you saw in the document from David Alexander. I'm going to move on to a concept by Mr. Greenleaf, Robert Greenleaf, the gentleman who created the construct of servant leadership. At times in an organization, there are going to be defining moments, fortuitous encounters. The insults day one were a defining moment. But then you engage and you find fortuitous encounters. One evening, at about 9 o'clock in the evening, I was at Needmore Road in the office, and about 10 African-American employees came to see me. And they were carrying hangman's nooses. And they said to me, Ricardo, this was about 2 months after I was there. Ricardo, people leave these at our workstations when we go to lunch. I was shocked, ladies and gentlemen. I asked, how long has this been going on? And they stated that it had been going on for about 10 years. I immediately called Joe Buckley, our HR director, and Jim Villella and said, explain the situation, share with them. We need to start a cadence of meetings at 11 o'clock tonight. Since we had an 18-hour cycle that we could shut down the plant, we'd standardized the ability to shut down the plant an hour at a time. We did that. Joe and I communicated the fact that that kind of activity in our family with values that we've pronounced is not acceptable. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it stopped. It was just a handful of misguided people. There was another event that was a defining moment about 4 months in, when a gentleman had a finger amputated. Now, ladies and gentlemen, thankfully, because of processes that we had in safety, Scott is fine today. But when that occurred, I was not far away from where it happened because I was on the Gemba. And I was immediately notified and I went to the infirmary, and it was a very chilly day. And I had a jacket. Scott didn't. The ambulance arrived. So I gave Scott my jacket. And then I decided, you know what, I'm going to go with him. How can I leave him alone? So I rode with him to the hospital. He was immediately taken up to surgery. And then what I noticed as I sat in the emergency room, a bunch of other executives from GM started to arrive, and plant managers and engineering people and maintenance people, as well as union people. Scott's mom and his wife walked in, and we had to talk to them. Now, that's a very emotional event that oftentimes executives, leaders tend to shun. Well, we had no other alternative. We had to embrace it and talk about the fact and console and support these people. Thankfully, he's all right. So there's always going to be defining moments that one can take and you can find some source of practical wisdom and learning to move forward with. This was a fortuitous encounter with a maintenance worker at an all-employee meeting right when we started. You can read it, but effectively, the abnormal became normal at Wisconsin-Needmore. When this gentleman stood up and said this, I had to meet him after the meeting. And I've never forgotten this. Now, as we began to execute the safety plan, we then started to get feedback from our team members. Here's James and what he said. Good plan to focus on what we're doing. A lot of people now are aware of what's going on. Liz says, awareness of safety, it's in the forefront of what we do every day. Gary, a formal system. Again, Mr. Nanda, the use of the word system, that we're interested and actively involved in one's welfare. Now, what began to consolidate information on safety, we had 2 separate safety stations at each one of our facilities. And basically, they spoke about our objectives within the construct of that safety pyramid, documented and shared it. Now you see right in the middle there is the football field. And I'm going to talk about that. That's a lot of fun to talk about. But one of the unique things we did there was to foster a conscious recognition of safety on the floor. We installed free blood pressure machines. Now, if a person begins to take their blood pressure day to day, they begin consciously and subconsciously to transfer that awareness of health and safety to the floor. And that was significant, very significant. That's now been applied by Toyota, and I saw it in Maserati in Europe, in Torino. Here are some of our team members' comments on the business plan. Mike Weaver, providing a guideline, a blueprint for success. Marquis, it's a good roadmap to help us achieve our goals and our objectives. And Laura, running a business without a plan is like taking a trip without a map. or without knowing your destination. We finally began to transmit our destination. Now, mind you, at the same time we're doing this, we're engaged in negotiations. And this is something I sent to the entire negotiation team, our union brothers and management as well. And it became our battle cry. Whatever we do today in terms of an agreement cannot diminish the prospects of future generations of workers. We have to care for what we do. Moving on to creating urgency and enabling structures and accountability. We talked about the all-employee meetings, and it was an open dialogue, no questions that were shunned. We had to explain why of the change and the fact that we're going to fix things. And I had that acquiescence on the part of the CEOs, both of GM and Delphi. Education and training was huge. We created a memorial to UAW team members and safety, and team member murals and the power of 12.2. I'll talk about that momentarily. We emphasized what Mr. Elson called in the 1990s, a great GM executive VP. He called Gemba fieldism. I really like that, fieldism. Go out to the field. And you'll see that with respect to Abraham Lincoln and a leadership card momentarily. We also developed a 2-minute reflection for safety, a football field problem-solving process, plant communication stations, and weekly and monthly metrics reviews at each one of the 7 plants. Every plant we reviewed weekly and monthly for their performance at the Gemba, at the plant, and you'll see our stations to do that. This was our safety memorial. Ladies and gentlemen, these people you see here are General Motors employees who lost their lives at work. And at the initiation of every shift, we gave people 2 minutes to reflect on safety. They could do it, they could ignore it, or they could do it in silence. Oftentimes, 80% of the time, people prayed with each other. That was something we didn't promote in terms of prayer, but if we gave people 2 minutes to reflect on safety. When I was at Orion Assembly Plant, I was not the plant manager there. There was a fatality. And 6 months after the fatality, they asked the wife in a video documentary some questions about her husband who had passed away. And she mentioned something I'll never forget. I thought my husband went to work and not to die. I've never forgotten that. It's about respect. Talking about respect, at Wisconsin and Needmore, we had a great legacy. So we created murals in both plants, respecting our legacy, our past on the left, my left, okay? Those are photographs of people from the 40s and 50s, 60s at Wisconsin Needmore. And then on the right, our future, the future that we have to support. And the power of 12.2 is this. Every single day, we accumulated collectively 12.2 years of knowledge in that organization. Now, we as leaders can either respect it or neglect it. We embraced it through respect. Now, cumulatively, our average seniority of those 3,100 people was about 25 years. That translates to roughly 77,000 years of experience. When Jack Smith, our CEO of GM, visited our plant, he saw the machine. We had a timer with an algorithm that just kept moving. He asked what it was. And we said, that's our collective experience. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm not kidding you. He was walking into the plant. He almost stumbled because it's a significant paradigm shift for someone who's leading almost 400,000 people globally. This is a very important tool that we used, Mr. Nanda and Mr. Gibson. We took our 5-step problem-solving process, which was a derivative of Toyota. We were forced to use this by GM. We put it into a football field. Ohio has a big football culture. We wanted to build enthusiasm to solve problems. It was a critical visual tool. You started with your problem on your 20-yard line, and you moved it. Once you solved it, you scored a touchdown. You see those points. If for whatever reason that problem came back to haunt you, you had a touchdown scored against you. The goal here was to have a blowout. But then again, we all know the adage. There's an adage from India that's beautiful. Even when the wind stops, a leaf will still fall. And sometimes things happen. So we brush ourselves off and we attack those 7 points they scored against us. We talked a little bit about the communication on a weekly and on a monthly basis. This is just a diagram of it. And the key language that you use when engaging team members, how may I support you? And the response, if people are aware and informed, will be something about safety, quality, cost, faster, great. And they're going to say, I need this, I need that. And that should be done on a daily basis with their supervisor and their team leads. And we'll talk about that momentarily with a technique that we use in terms of a clipboard. Now, we talked about the safety station, right? Dedicated to safety. This is a sketch of what our 7 plant communication stations look like, with the metrics in each one of the areas in which people would engage, and that is where we would have the meetings, plant by plant, week by week, month by month. The football field was there, again, creating a sense of enthusiasm, and it became the standard for all the plants. There's a plant communication live, and there's Ann, Bruce, and Dave with some of their comments. We began to collectively manage the enterprise. And look at what Ann says, the metric board's compilation of information, reviewed to see how we're succeeding in each area. Mr. Hamlin lets people know how we're doing, lets us know whether we're losing or saving money. Mr. Williams shows us what's going on at the plant, lets us know how we're doing, what we can do and where accidents happen. A useful tool for people on the Gemba, on the floor. Moving on, in urgency and enabling structures, we developed a winners and learning pyramid. Now, Mr. Gibson and ladies and gentlemen, we developed a safety plan and a business plan. Those things drive the enterprise. I always feel that there's a complementary element. You have to drive the behaviors that engage the enterprise. So we developed a winner's profile and a learning pyramid. And during the Q&A, hopefully somebody asked me a question on the winner's profile. I'll tell you how we wrote that. It's very curious. It's a symbolic linkage to safety and business plan pyramids, the winner's P and the learning pyramid. So now you have 4 pyramids guiding our actions. They define team members' expectations and behaviors. Pursuit of excellence is central. We began piloted actions in terms of training and workshops, primarily in these 3 areas that relate to quality: problem solving, design of experiments, the training in an active team, and theory of constraints. Now the DOE, curiously, we actually extended that to the realm of finance and began to run sensitivity on new projects and on existing business. A very interesting dynamic that I learned here that I then took elsewhere. Again, continuing with enabling structures. Basically, we wanted to create a place where behaviors were the key element of training. We altered the space for key symbols. As we say in Toyota, the walls must speak, the plant has to speak. The concept of and-on, you have to be able to interact with items other than humans to know what may be happening or not happening. We ensured clarity with all employees, allowed people to openly participate and practice new behaviors, and began contemplation of symbolic recognition. Now, what we wanted was acts of difference, not acts of presence. Acts of difference, not acts of presence. So these are the 2 booklets we created. The winner's profile, jointly developed with the UAW, with details that you'll see momentarily, and a learning pyramid. These 2 booklets are the business plan for human beings and human behavior, complementing the safety and the business plan. That's the winner's profile. There's a triangle, and you'll see how that comes into play with the recognition. And what is a winner? Winner wins for the customer. Now, this is a very key point. What worker or what member of a union is going to argue when you say you want to win for the customer? You can't argue. It's like apple pie. You can't argue with it. We explain what values are, and then each of these other elements, values, skills, and personality and observable actions, were all defined in this 9-page booklet. We trained 3,100 people in this. And there are some of the definitions. I'm not going to go through them in detail. But it's fascinating how this book came about. This was a previous life I had at GM, okay, where we turned negatives into positives. Now let's talk a little bit about the learning pyramid. Here's a learning pyramid. Basically, there's foundational skills that we should have when we walk in the door. And then you develop and you excel at 5 competencies: resources, information systems, technology, and interpersonal. A balance of both the technical and the accomplishment, the human side of the equation. And what we did with the learning pyramid was wonderful. We actually used names of real people in our plants who are executing action in the learning pyramid. Fascinating. This is an advancement we made from the winner's profile. And here are some people who are exemplifying the winner's profile. This particular slide should have been 2 slides ago. I apologize for where it's placed. I'll move it and I'll correct it. But this gives you an idea of how the winner's profile was being executed. This gives you an idea of how the learning pyramid was being executed. This is one of the definitions on the learning pyramid in terms of a competency. And here you can begin to see actual real workers' names being used in this 25-page booklet, which we trained 3,100 people in comprehensively. There's some comments in terms of fostering new learning and constraint management from Mr. Roberts and Tom Brown. This was a very, very key phase. Problem solving a la Toyota, albeit the fact that it's got a GM twist. DOE was very significant in that team. The extension to the realm of finance in terms of modeling, and then constraints management. And constraint management is a very, very key factor at Toyota. It's kind of unsung, but the 80-20 concept in conjunction with constraint management is a technique that we use very actively in Toyota. Now we move on to sharing leadership. It was imperative. We had to do it together. Listen and learn quickly, continuously through TPS. Broad support from GM CEO and Mr. Battenberg. So we had sponsors and champions. The Lincoln on Leadership card, we'll talk about that in the defining moment. UAW formal and informal channels. UAW invited to staff meetings. And sound shared leadership is essential. Here we go. This is a letter I received from a maintenance worker about 4 months into our stay. I'm convinced that leadership, from Wanda Lovely, is the ability to build productivity through teamwork. And then she says something very interesting. We have leadership problems. We don't need to fix people. We need to fix our sights on a goal that will cascade from the plant manager office to all levels of leadership. I couldn't have said it better. We realize that the challenges are monumental at the very end, and time is working against us. But our optimism lies in knowing the potential of our people and what we can achieve through teamwork. The power of 12.2. The power of 12.2. Thank you, Wanda. Mel and Mr. Ashwell. Mr. Ashwell was one of our plant managers. Here he is with Mr. Battenberg and Mel. Mel was his union counterpart. They were the benchmark in running a facility together. An absolute benchmark. Wonderful, wonderful example for all of us. Now, moving on to Lincoln on leadership cards. As Wanda's alluded to, leadership was very critical. And I developed these cards years ago in my first plant manager job. And they're Lincoln Principles on Leadership that I adopted from a book by Phillips called Lincoln on Leadership. And I wanted to implement them here. So I spoke to Joe, and Joe said to me, Ricardo, I don't think people are leaders. Our workers are leaders. And I said, Joe, well, I kind of differ. I think when anyone sees a problem, they can choose to do something about it or not do something about it. I said, we'd like to really create an environment where people do something about it. So he said, move forward. We did it. And we began to share these cards with everybody. And by the way, I'd like to give everybody at ASQ in Phoenix, if you get me, I think I've got the numbers of people from Mr. Mitchell's presentation. So I'm going to get a set of these things made. So if people would like them, they can have them. But these principles began to guide our leadership. The first one is very critical. The one that I have pointed out second is Gemba, and then seeking casual contact with your subordinates in the Gemba. Key to leadership. Talking about where credit should be given, when affecting renewal, and then also a good leader avoids issuing orders. There were sound principles. These have been translated into Spanish, Japanese, German, French, Russian. They have a ubiquitous nature. Dr. Toyota said to me when he read these, he said, after reflection, Ricardo, I wish we all did this or practiced this. Now, here's another very interesting letter. This was anonymous, and it talked about the contentious nature between management and the union. Firefighting is what's done most of the time, that blue arrow points out. And then at the very end, do not give up. Do not think what you are trying to do is falling on deaf ears. Give us time to understand, grow, and change. People wanted to change, and we offered them the opportunity to do it. So crafting a plan to implement included the metric boards, key performance metrics, managing the sense of equilibrium, running the business, negotiating simultaneously, TMS-based problem solving a la GM. Again, the plant must speak, and then categorizing our objectives: safety, quality, cost, fast, and great. There's that communication station again. And this was a great idea from a team member. Got it right here. Team members who'd never managed the business before had to learn formulas. Excuse me. How to calculate safety ratios, quality ratios, cost ratios. This was a little booklet that was designed for them to do that. Absolutely paramount in terms of change. And we then developed this innovative idea called continuous improvement wall. Excuse me. What it was the only form of graffiti we wanted to see in the plant was their continuous improvement plastered on the walls in their areas, stratified by safety, quality, cost, fast, and great. And here you see a sample of it from our Plant 5, all derived from our business plan. Here's the roadmap to win in quality from Needmore Road, where we have definitive actions timed to attack ppm as a disease, as a virus, and wipe it out. Now, I talk a lot about equilibrium. In July of 1996, we were on the red side of this equation. We had inferior performance, and we were in the red zone in terms of feelings and sentiments. With this plan that we had, we began to move to the left side, create a sense of urgency, but not panic, recognition, not stress, realization, not frustration, competition, not anxiety, challenge, not sense of loss, opportunity, not fear. And we began to execute this. But in implementing change, one has to maintain equilibrium. We also developed this supervisor clipboard and a customer enthusiasm cycle, which are just fascinating. Don't want to go through the balance of these, you'll get them. But I do want to share with you those two key components right now. There's a supervisor clipboard. This is it. It's one of the few things Toyota adapted from GM. What we did was we provided this to every supervisor and every union leader. It described what you do in a standardized fashion to report an accident and what you do in a chemical spill. And equally as important, it described on the backside the kinds of questions you ask in the Gemba and the kinds of questions you ask when you're reviewing on a weekly and a monthly basis at the respective boards in the areas, or as you walk an area on a daily basis. And you can see there are the four pyramids: safety, the business plan, the winner's profile, and the learning pyramid. That's going to come into play momentarily. We also developed the customer enthusiasm cycle, which basically was, we're there for the customer 7/24, and we're going to immediately begin to time responses to any complaint. And our goal is to respond with immediate corrective action within 60 minutes or less. We began to do it. We began to do it. And you'll see that in our results. And right now, we want to talk a little bit about quick wins and promoting innovation. And the results all effectively came from executing our strategy. Now, I will talk, and those of you who want to ask questions, we did implement something very novel that Dr. Deming taught GM at Buick City many moons ago. It's called Voice of the Customer and Quality Stations. And that really had a transformative effect on us. I'll also cite here that it's easier to lift 3,100 pounds with 3,100 people. To some degree, we began to see momentum changing. We became the first UAW plant prior to the contract ratification to go smoke-free in North America. And there are a couple of items that were events that occurred that changed or altered us. And I'll talk about the poem and the trip to Quebec a little bit later on. But one of the interesting things that we did was got a group of union and managers together, and we developed this calendar. It's a perpetual calendar. And it has safety messages that are unique for 365 days in the year. There's our message today for today. It was in all our conference rooms and all of our meeting places. It was fascinating. Again, an attack on safety. Now, here are some results in safety. There were trend lines that we documented based on OSHA requirements and recordables and lost workdays. And you can see that the plant in 95 prior to the strike began a positive trend line based on its past history, what it began to do in terms of avoiding accidents. And you can see how that began to accelerate in terms of recordables. 96, 97, 98 as we implemented these concepts. And then obviously in concert, lost workdays. So the difference between our performance today and what the trend line would have been had we done nothing are those numbers. And they were verified by OSHA. Now, this was a poem that I shared at the second all-employee meeting. It's a story about a battle, somebody who's dying in battle. And I used it with Joe because we both talked about the word ceasefire. And it speaks about someone who's dying in battle. 5,000 people, 100,000 people, millions of people surround this man who's dying, asking him to please not die. And at the very end of the poem, it says all the inhabitants of the earth surrounded him. The corpse looked up and began to walk. And what we wanted to stress, Joe and I, at this meeting was that together we can literally accomplish the impossible. The impossible is possible. System alignment, again, the primary focus here was TMS, I should say. And then we developed some models that I'm going to reinforce with you visually momentarily. I'll fly through this. Here we go. Here's our foundations for customer satisfaction and enthusiasm. Began with those employee communication stations, intensive all employee meetings, the winner's profile, values that were defined in various formats, the 24-hour response card to customers, that supervisor clipboard, a supervisor handbook that was also given to the union and developed in part by the union, the learning pyramid, the water carrier definition, which I'll go through momentarily. That was our reward, our recognition for people, QS 9000, and a business plan summary, which is one of the elements of PDCA of Toyota, basically a balanced scorecard. We developed the water carrier award, an operating focus, supervisor's training book. And that particular award was given to every water carrier recipient. By 1998, we had 138 people who received it. We also used this model to train people in judgment. And we asked people to judge data and events, not judge people. Judge data and events, assess people, but don't judge people. And this was part of that detail. Some of the measures and milestones, again, they were basically focused on our objectives. We also had to maintain deep levels of humility. And then also we had an awareness, right, that kindness can't be mistaken for weakness. And then MANEPO was management of negative and positive leaders. Okay, one of the catalysts for change was the fact that the union did not believe our finances. So we told them, we'll go out and hire one of the big three. They chose Deloitte. Deloitte came back, analyzed our books, and told the union we really have a problem. And that was the catalyst for the agreement. We then signed a 6-year local UAW agreement that was achieved and ratified. That's never been done in the United States of America since then with the UAW. Their agreements are typically 3 years. We also had a 10-year no strike clause. The board visited us along with Jack Smith and Mr. Battenberg in '98, and the UAW led that visit. The board, one of the questions the board members asked me, this is the place that striked against us? DNV, our QS auditor, said that we were the model for team member engagement. We did it. Every team member has a copy of our plan to win, and this basically encompassed all the points that we engaged in the process of transformation, with a focus on safety, a focus on quality, and a focus on delivery. Here's our PPM performance. We typically ship 300,000 units a day, 6 million units a month, 72 million units a year. And there's our performance. From 97 to 98, it was an 85% reduction in defects. When you look at the data in 1998, June, July, August, September, my Lord, 2, 2, 6, and 2. This team really knew how to do it. We engaged people like Wanda, like Dave, like all of our water carriers. All of our initiatives in each of the stratified objectives had action plans that demonstrated leaders and the supports for each of the activities. We also had critical customer visitation schedules, again, to regain credibility and our reputation. And you can see some of the assembly plants that we'd visit and the plan to visit them and by whom. Now we're going to get into our results. This is a product we had, clutch plates, 73% improvement in PPMs and defects, as well as some other activities. Again, these are all stratified within the construct of our objective: safety, quality, cost, fast, and great. ABS DBC7. DBC7 was a very sophisticated ABS system that had to be built in a clean room. We had significant startup challenges with that product. But as you can see, an 86% reduction in premium freight. We started to hit our production rate. Drum brakes, a very traditional area. We reduced our burden spending, which was primarily labor, by $2.1 million in one calendar year. And then you can see the other improvements from overtime to PPM. Master cylinders. Here, we utilized the quality gate. We piloted the quality gate with Deming, from Dr. Deming, the Buick City concept, a 99% improvement in PPM. And if anybody has questions about that, we can take that offline and I can share with you that dynamic. Vacuum boosters. strong customer focus, 70% reduction in PPM. And you can look 0 lost workday cases, safety as well. The response clock, 100% responses to customers in less than 1 hour. Dish, shoe, and lining, very traditional department. This is the department that initiated the strike. We recuperated sales with C-Tainer, which is basically service parts organization at GM, a 470% improvement there. And here's materials management. Again, many water carriers here, many people who brought us water. In terms of recognition, we'll see that momentarily. But these are descriptions and formats that we used for all of our plants and all of our continuous improvement walls. So now we're going to get to our final element of the wheel, which is rewards and recognition. And so obviously we want to respect and celebrate improvement, link it to the vision, focus on team member accomplishment as well as team, and promote our new culture. And this was our award. It's called the Water Carrier Award. And there's a definition. There's Herman and Liz. Okay. Water is essential. In many societies, the water carrier was a vital part of their rituals, as well as nourishment and life. In short, water is life. Water is, and the water carrier is the carrier or the bringer of life. A manufacturing plant is a microcosm of society. We have our own rituals and our nourishment that sustains us. Many people comprise our organization. Everybody is important and valuable to the evolution and well-being of our business. Yet there are those individuals who truly bring life by demonstrating a spirit of humanity, ingenuity, tireless efforts to the business. These very people are our water carriers. Their actions bring life and provide us with the opportunity to see tomorrow. That's the award. It's a pyramid with that person, a human being in gold, encapsulated in a drop of water. And you can see it has 4 sides that reflect 2 sides of the business pyramid, the safety and the business plan that run the business, and the winner's profile and the learning pyramid to encompass the totality of the pyramid. Here's an award. This particular award went on when Mr. Battenberg was there. Here's another award with Tony. That previous one was Pete Salmon. And here's Tony giving an award in that little box to one of our team members. Here are more people who brought us water. Tons of people. And if you look at the lower right-hand corner where Rolf is at, you can see the business plan pyramids behind him on his wall, those laminated copies that we gave to people. And here are more people who provided us with the opportunity to see tomorrow. So getting back, excuse me, to what Mr. Nanda said, in terms of how does one engage this? To institutionalize change and build a culture, needless to say, it starts with people who effectively are provided with tools and system that then access their deep knowledge, their inherent deep knowledge in an organization. That elementally becomes philosophical in terms of the way that you do things, and that builds the culture. Now, this is a final thought from a great MBA student that I have. And this is a very interesting poem. Watching, and if you can allow me to read it, and this will end everything for today. I watched them tearing a building down, a gang of men in a busy town. With a ho heave ho and a lusty yell, they swung a beam and a sidewall fell. I asked the foreman, are these men skilled as the men you'd hire if you had to build? He gave me a laugh and said, no, indeed, just common labor is all I need. I can easily reckon a day or two what builders have taken a year to do. And I thought to myself as I went my way, which of these true roles have I tried to play? Am I a builder who works with care, measuring life by rule and square? Am I shaping my deed by a well-made plan, patiently doing the best I can? Or am I a wrecker who walks the town content with the labor of tearing down? Wisconsin need more, and our great people didn't tear down. We built. Great people. So on behalf of them and to you, I express my thanks for the opportunity to share this journey and some of its elements. Thank you very much. The exhibits are at the end, and I'm not going to go through them, but I'll send them out to you. They're basically the change process and the 10 elements with general definitions that can be applied literally to any business, not specifically to ours, as I suggested. Okay, that's it.
So I had a question, Ricardo. Are you planning to have this presentation available
Yes,
to
sir.
the attendees? If you could send
Yes,
that to me,
absolutely.
and then I can post it to our website.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Appreciate that.
No, that's the promise that I engage in a conversation with Mr. Nanda. Absolutely, this is yours.
Very
A
good.
gift from these great people in Ohio.
Thank you. And when you also mentioned the Lincoln principles, you're going to
Yes,
make those available.
right. I'm right now. I have approximately 100, but I think I need about 500 for you based on the numbers I saw.
We have 500 members, but if that's up to you how many you want to make available to us. But or we can just send them to the people who attended tonight's program.
I will get you 500, sir.
Okay.
That's no problem. I
okay.
know the printer and he knows me.
Well, I would greatly appreciate that.
You're welcome.
All right. Does anybody have any questions they would like to ask Ricardo before we move on? You can either raise your hand or unmute yourself. I don't see any questions coming up at the moment.
And
one person did comment that this is the best presentation ever. Thank you. So,
well,
thank you for that, much. Patty.
Now, one thing that I can say, Mr. Mitchell, is this: there's specific drill down points that you might want to inquire about, such as the construct of DOE into finance and other realms. Do not hesitate to contact me. Please share my email if you can with every person who's been on the call, and I can drill down to levels and answer questions that anybody would have. I'd be more than happy to do that. In fact, I'd love to do that.
Yeah, so with your presentation up on our website, they will also have your email. That's in the last slide. And we are also recording this presentation, so that recorded presentation should be available within the next couple of days on our website as well. So we thank you very much, Ricardo, for your excellent presentation.
You're welcome. And one thing that I can share with you is that I serve on the board of a very, very big private company that's binational, US and Mexico, that's in the food service industry. And right now, Mr. Mitchell and team members, they are applying this process for change. So it's
just as relevant today, if not more so than it was in 1990s.
Yes, it sure is.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I would echo what you said, Bob. This is Vic and some of the attendees. This is a fantastic presentation, very rich presentation. I loved the anecdotes. It was packed with a lot of information. Obviously, there's a lot of prep that's gone into this. I love the insights and the nuggets and some of the the practical things that you showed us. So I don't recall seeing a presentation like this with that much content packed in just like about an hour or so. So really, thank you, Ricardo. I think this was fantastic that we had you speak to our section members.
Yeah, and hopefully you will be receiving some feedback directly from some of our participants tonight. So,
well, I think ASQ is fantastic, Mr. Mitchell and Mr. Nanda. And one thing that I can send you is the 8-step problem-solving process of Toyota in a soccer field that we're doing in Mexico right now. So it's wonderful, and it's creating an incredible amount of buzz and enthusiasm among 17,000 people.
Right, make it relevant to the culture and society that you're working with.
Exactly.
Great idea. Yeah. Well, thank you.
So thank you again, Mr. Nanda, Mr. Mitchell,
All right.
and to everybody who linked up in this conference. And Mr. Gibson, thank you very, very much for the connection. And I just, last but not least, everybody, please take care. Please take care. And I wish you and your families the very best.
Thank you very much. And we express the same desires and wishes for you and your family as well.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, just a few closing comments then. Reminder that you will be receiving an email from our Voice of Customer chair with a survey link, and also attached will be your recertification unit certificate. Some of our upcoming programs in February, we will have Mr. Steven Zylstra, who is the president of the Arizona Technology Council. So someone in our own backyard will be speaking to us and presenting perhaps some opportunities for our two organizations to become better aligned and work and help with each other. Then in March, a familiar name, I think, to many people in our section, especially those who are also Quality Management Division members, Dan Zremak will be giving a presentation on Membership XL. So take advantage of enhancing your ASQ membership from a professional to the senior and fellow, and you'll be talking about the benefits of those different levels of membership and what that means to you professionally. And then in April, Vic Nanda has lined up Austin Lynn, who is a past president of ASQ, to give a presentation. And then in May, the president of the ISLSS, the International Standard for Lean Six Sigma organization, Stephen Bonacorsi, will be with us. So those are the speakers confirmed for the first half of the year. And we will keep you up to date if any changes occur and as we get more speakers firmed. But that's the program schedule as it sits today. Excellent job by Vic, again, as usual. Just a couple of conferences coming up this month. So obviously at the end of February, we have the Lean Six Sigma conference, but here yet this month, toward the end of January, there is the RAMS conference, the Annual Reliability and Maintainability Symposium. And that's a virtual conference, so you can click the link and view more. Again, the Lean Six Sigma conference in our own backyard. There are still volunteering opportunities available. If interested, please contact Hillary Werner, and you have her email address here. And they do finally have the program posted. So if you navigate to this link, you'll get more about the program itself and the opportunity to register for the event. And just a final mention of our section activities on social media. We are on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. So hopefully there's something there for every generation and every level of interest. We welcome you to participate deeper with the society. We're always looking for committee members, committee leaders. So if you have any interest in increasing your level of collaboration with peers and experts, we welcome you to come join the leadership team of the Phoenix section. So with that, I want to thank everybody for your participation, and we will have another exciting conference in February, the second Thursday in February. Meanwhile, stay safe, be healthy, and enjoy your time. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.